Okay, welcome back. So we're almost there. Okay, we are almost there. The problem we face right now is so far we learned how we can go through a file, take cell by cell, row by row, and append it to a different file. Problem is, how do we make the finding of the Excel files we need to merge? How do we automate that as well? If not, we would have for each line of code, we would have to name the Excel documents. If we would do that, we could do it by hand anyways. It would be kind of the same speed. So we need an algorithm loop or whatever, which goes through the folder, finds all the Excel files which are in there. So we only store them one time in one directory path. By the way, we already did that in my data. Go through all Excel files, opening them one after another, and then we can use our other loop and taking that, right? That would be a fancy way of doing it. Great. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we need our good old package OS, which we already did for getting the current working directory. OS has more functionality than that. It can, with open file, with get current working directory, it can get the current working directory, change directory, changes to current working directory, and there's another function, walk, which takes a specific directory, for example, the Active Directory or the current working directory, and then goes through that. So that's why it's called walk. It basically walks through the directory and looks each document in it, takes each document which is in that directory one after another. So it walks basically the directory tree, because directories are built like trees, but that's another you don't have to care about. Just imagine there's a path, a directory, and we take one document which is in that directory after the other document, one after another, and for each of them, we then could check something. For example, are you an Excel file or are you something different? So the idea is we have the directory by current working directory. We can walk through that directory, and then we can open each file in it if it's a correct file, right? So let's do that step by step. First of all, we need to import the package OS. You already did that, so if you do not have to do that again, but sometimes I do that for safety reasons, so I just feel secure that it's really activated, because you go on a short break and there's a timeout or stuff, so everything's again activated here. What do we have to do next? Then we need the current working directory. We have changed it to my data, which is good and fine, but now we need it as a variable to later on use that. So we store the current working directory in the variable wd for working directory. And how do we get it? We already know that. We type os and type in get current working directory, and then we have stored it, and we check that by printing it. And there's an error that happens sometimes, and I have to check that quickly. Okay, I can tell you what the problem is. There's a space, and Google Colab at least doesn't like spaces. By the way, one cool feature for everyone using Colab. There's an error. Usual debugging means go to Stack Overflow, and hopefully someone else had a problem you have as well. That's how programmers do work actually in practice as well. And what does Google Colab say? Search Stack Overflow by one click. It takes the error term and gives you a direct link to Stack Overflow to see if there's a solution. And this is excellent feature. In that case, we do not have that. However, I figured it out on my own. Okay, now the next step is we actually need now a loop who loops through the directory and takes all the files in it. So we need a for loop. We need a variable which I will call file names, because in that directory there are files and they have names. And how long do we loop? So we take our function we learned from above here, so the walk function. So we need os _walk. And in which directory do we walk through with the function? In the directory we just stored in wd, so the working directory. And as long as there are files, and the working directory is now my data, as we can see, so we go into my data and say, okay, first file, second file, third file, fourth file, fifth file, sixth file, and so on, and then here the last file. And then it's ended. Okay. Okay, as long as there are files in it, we can check if that works by just printing file names. So it should print the file names one after another. And in the beginning it has a list of all the file names in it. So we get basically that gets back os walk wd gets back a list of all file names in the directory. And so file names should be a list with all file names in it. And then we have another for loop where we go through that list file name by file name, because we have a list of all the file names. So then we have the current file, as long as that is in file names. So an inner loop, and then we can print if we have the current files. And that again and now we can show first of all at the result. We have two prints here and we can look at it. That helps us sometimes. Okay, what do we see here? First of all, we print file names, right? And file names seem to be then this long list here. And as we can see, it contains the files we want to access, like March honey, April honey, March toothpaste, February mustards, playbook as well, which we should probably delete, because if not, we're somehow taking playbook and merging it again with playbook. That doesn't make sense. But the problem is this list has my data in front of it, because that's the root directory and it always gives this back, and IPNP checkpoints, which is a file we do not see, which is stored from Python in that order, in the directory in which we work in, as a working file which will be deleted after we work with it. However, as long as we have Python running, it's there, but we don't see it. Some backend functionality. So we have the problem that we have those files as well. So in the loop, inside our loop, where we say, okay, we want to go through February toothpaste and April, we have one problem, because we actually do take my data in the inner loop, then we take IP, Y, and B checkpoints, and then we take the whole list of this thing as third element. So to actually, because we have three lists in the first hierarchy, in the second, then we go in those lists, we take those lists in the second loop. So we actually need a third loop to get into our actual third list and to the documents there. So that's why I changed it to files, because I already knew that, because for our loop current files, we need a third iteration to get into now, because in the third iteration we have that, and we want to go one hierarchy deeper, where we actually have this, then this, then this in hand. So we need this third loop where we actually have the current file and not the current files. and this is in current files, and here we have then current file. And what happens now is we first go in the outer loop and have all the file names. Then we take this first file name in current files, and then we go inside that, and since this is already a string, we go through it string by string in the third hierarchy. Then we go to the next one, which is IP, Y, and B checkpoints, and then we go inside that list in the third hierarchy, because that's still a list and no string. We see it in the brackets and take every element in it, which is only one. And then we go to the third list, which is this whole list, and then we go through it in the third iteration, element by element, and the first element is February toothpaste, second is April toothpaste, and so forth, and we have all the elements. Alrighty, that worked out quite well. So now we have a problem. Now we get to those elements. How do we identify if you're an Excel file we want to open? Because the idea is we have one storage where we put in all Excel files and there's nothing else in it. So we need to differentiate, are you an Excel file, or are you just a string telling me which folder I am in, or are you just a working file of Python, not called XLSX in the end. Okay, so the identification of an Excel file for us will be if the ending of it, so the data type, is .xlsx. How do we check that with the tools we have? So going back to the full left, so we take our string from, we take our loop from here, first of all, and we now know that with that we get down to the point. I'm just erasing the prints because I don't need them. We're getting down to the point where in the third list we are at Excel files. Okay, so in that hierarchy we want to check something. And what do we want to check? Are you an Excel file? And how do we check conditions? Remember Python basics with if. So if the current file, that's how I wrote it, is somehow ending on XLSX. And now you need a new function you do not know yet. You can always check a string if it contains a certain other string or a certain letter or whatever by the function find. So I can now check if the string name of the current file, which is, as we know, for example, April toothpaste.xlsx. This is a string. And we can check that string if it contains .xlsx by just using the find function xlsx. So now it checks each file if it contains this substring part. And if it contains this, it will add to a counter that it at least, the string we have in hand at least contains that once, that twice, that thrice, depending on how often it's in that string. So since it's only in the ending, it should be at least one. Could be that we have it in the file name as well, so it could be twice, but shouldn't come off too often, but at least above 0, because it's always at least once if it's an Excel file. As long as we stick to the point that we do not have XLX documents, which are, or XLS, I don't remember which was the old standard for 2010, I guess, Excel, which is the old ending of Excel. All new Excel files since 2010 or 12 are XLSX files. So it should be above 0 in the counts. And if that is the case, we want to do something. We take a new variable we call current workbook. So we have a new workbook. And this will be a new workbook. So we use OpenPy XL. and say we load a workbook, and this is our current file. So what did I do here? I'm telling through OpenPyXL that we want to open a workbook, one that's already existing. And this workbook already existing is the one workbook with the name I just identified in my loop. So for example, April Honey. I'm holding a current file. Does it contain XLSX? Yes. So then open it, because the full name is stored in current file, and we load the workbook with the full name April Honey XLSX. But only if the current file which I'm holding is an Excel file, so it contains XLSX. So now that we've opened it, we can access the current worksheet in a new variable where we take the current workbook and take the active worksheet. And now we have the current worksheet in hand and we can start manipulating it, but so far we only want to check it. So we want to print out the current worksheet. For example, what is standing in the cell A1 as debugging info, and I put a string in front of that, so because I want to concatenate that with another string, a space, and then I want another string, ts, so I need that here, where we, I don't know, take b1. So now what we did here is something which should go through the directories until we have the XLSX files, like we learned on this top part here. Then we're checking if it is an Excel file, and if it is an Excel file, we open it, and at that point we have the active sheet. The plus is too much. Then we have the sheet active, and now we could manipulate it. Now we could do what we learned. We could go row by row through it with our other loop and merge it with the other document. But I first want to check if that works by printing debugging again and look if I'm actually having the documents and get date values in column A and product values in column B. Check it. Okay. Somehow we opened a February document of toothpaste, then we opened an April document of toothpaste, then in January of honey, and so on and so forth. It works. Great. And it's 12 documents. Worked out fine. But we have date product here. Why is date product here? Because one Excel file in here is playbook. So again, if we have playbook in here, I would then merge date and product one time more into playbook. So we need to delete it to go further. Delete. Okay, and now we're at the point you can work on the last exercise. We have everything in place. We need a workbook. You prefill with date, amount sold, and product. The rest is empty. Then you need the loop to get to the point where you have an Excel file open and have it in an active worksheet. Then you need the other loop I showed you, where you go row by row through the document, merge it in your new document playbook or whatever you want to call it, and then go to the next Excel file, go through that row by row, column by column, merge it with the other Excel file, and go on and on and on until there are no Excel files left, and you finally merge them all together. You have everything in hand. Here are the exercises. I will show you the solution in the next video.